What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Coulee Region Whitetails. It is part 2 of the basement video. In this video, you're going to watch us wrap up our last 2 deer mounts and talk about more of our unique, not really exact mounts, but more unique mounts. So, hopefully you enjoy this second part of the mounts and in our basement. Thank you for watching Coulee Region Whitetails.
So this is a buck that actually last year Isaac had shot his buck that we're going to talk about here in a minute that you guys have actually seen on film. And so he was done hunting, but he was still scouting, and we were in football and going through football practices and stuff like that, and we'd get done with practice and I'd come home and he would run out to the farm and start looking around to see what was out there, and one day he came back and he's like, "Hey Dad, there is a absolute tank running around out there." And so he's like, you gotta get to your tree stand. So I actually had taken a couple of days off of mornings off, whatever, from teaching and to be able to hunt. And so I went out the first morning and actually grunted this guy into about 65 yards, and my father-in-law had logged off his property. And so this guy came down to the brush pile, and it was kind of interesting because he just looked at it like, "Dude, I'm not coming through there. I don't see anything. I'm not coming over there." And so he actually turned around and walked away. And I had about 15 minutes before I had to get to school. And in that 15 minutes, I think I felt like I was going to cry because he was such a nice deer and he was so close. And I just couldn't get him to cross that brush pile just to get him in a little bit closer for a shot. So I figured that was it. I wasn't going to have a chance to get another shot at him. But the next morning I came out, and sure enough, here he is. He comes cruising through, chasing a doe way out of bow range. But I got to see him, and actually that was the only deer I saw, was him and that doe that morning. And so that night I'm like, you know what, Donna, you still got a license, and why don't you go sit with Isaac, and I will go sit in a stand that we just hung that year. And try to drag a scent wick through and give you a chance, hopefully, for him to come through. And one of us is on the bottom of the hill, one is at the top of the hill. And so we go out, and Isaac and Donna get set up, and I wet down a drag rag and take the drag rag all the way up to the stand and get into the stand. And so we're only probably 250 yards apart, and all of a sudden deer just start coming out. They come out in the field, they come out behind me, and I have deer just all over me. And the part of the stand that's a problem is when you sit down and it's really hard to get up. And so I was kind of pinned down by some does and a small buck, and all of a sudden here he starts coming down the trail, and I'm like, holy cow, this deer is going to come through at 10 yards and I can't get a shot because I can't stand up. And for whatever reason, he ended up turning and coming down a different trail, and the smaller buck that came over the hill and started chasing these does around, and they got them moving. And so as he was coming through this really thick brush, I was able to stand up, and as I stood up, he stepped out on the loggy road, and I drew and I shot, and I only missed the judge the distance by about 15 yards. So it was a really bad shot, and we backed out after about 25-30 minutes of waiting. I finally went down to where these guys were sitting. Isaac texted me right away, asked me what I shot because he could hear me shoot. And so we got down. They had a great night of hunting. They saw a ton of deer, just no opportunities. And so we actually went back that night and took a look, and you guys probably saw the video. Took a look. We weren't finding what we wanted to find, so we backed out, which was kind of scary because of what happened to his deer, and I'll let him tell about what happened to his deer with the coyotes and stuff. So we had to take a chance of the coyotes not getting to this deer. And fortunately for us, we went back the next day, and like I said, we showed you that video last year of the recovery of this deer. Like I said, just an absolute terrible shot. There is no reason whatsoever I should have gotten this deer. But for some lucky fate, he ended up aspiring. We found him like basically 60 yards from where we stopped the night before. And like I say, he ended up scoring 154, I believe.
Yep.
153?
153, 154. But one big thing though, like with this is I went through and I used the DeerCast tracking app and went through, and it said to give this deer at least 6 hours, which we didn't at first, but I went back that morning and looked at it, and that's what it said. So we knew we had given him plenty of time, but also give credit a little bit to the new rages that we have started shooting. Have serrated edges on the back, so we kind of thought, maybe that deer couldn't pull that arrow back out because of the serrated edges, and he finally just ended up catching that artery that in the end actually ended up killing him.
Yeah, so like I say, it was like again, kind of an unfortunate. Like I say, we really want to shoot deer and have a humane kill, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. And with this guy, like I said, we had to back out and come back in, and like I say, you hear it on a lot of the different shows that we watch, over the years. And the biggest thing that they talk about is if it's dead now, it's gonna be dead when you come back in the morning. And it's something that, like I say, probably a number of years ago when we started hearing that, I think we became better trackers, better hunters because of listening and taking the advice of the guys that were doing it professionally. And like I say, it's I think one of the reasons why we found this one, because we were able to back out and not push them. And like I say, he ended up aspiring like 60 yards from when we stopped. So.
Shut off. Okay, so moving on to this deer. This was my biggest bow kill to date still. You can check this video out on our channel. The two cousins, one bow, two great bucks. So this deer is a pretty fun story actually, because Noah just ended up shooting his first deer ever with a bow, and it ended up being that goofy buck. And me, kind of being a little selfish, knew that this deer was coming out to the field. And I sat in a cornfield for, a week, 2 weeks, and watched this deer get up, walk out, feed right in front of this tree stand. So I knew that this buck was out there. And so I kind of told Noah, here, take the camera, and give me your bow, because we practice shooting each other's bow at lacrosse archery, just to make sure, you never know, just for the freak reason that this might happen. And we never would have guessed that we would have been able to pull this off. But I'm looking out because we had this beautiful 10-point working his way down, and it's like it's probably a 3-year-old, so it's one of those bucks I didn't know if I'd shoot or not. But I heard some rustling in the leaves behind me, and I looked down, and he's standing there just making a scrape right underneath this tree, and he's at 21 yards, but he's facing me in the brush, so I couldn't get a shot there. And I'm asking Noah, can you see this deer? Can you see this deer? He's like, I can't move. I got a 4-point looking at me. And this buck goes out in the field, and I'm ranging him as he's walking out, and he finally steps at 30, and he steps broadside. And I probably got about a foot-sized circle to shoot through on this deer. I'm like, Noah, you on him? He's like, I'll get on him. And he hears me draw back, and I just see him spin in this 4-point take off. I'm like, oh, it's now or never. And put the 30-yard pin on him, I let it go. And see it in the video is a little back. This deer runs out into this bean field, and we're all jacked up, and the tree stand's shaking, and we're thinking that this tree's gonna fall down. And I'm pretty sure we waited about 4 seconds to get out of the tree stand before we went up and got his deer. And we're thinking, because of us getting up, we actually might have spooked this buck up, or it finally felt like it was safe once it got dark out to move. And that coming in, we looked till almost 11 o'clock that night for this deer, just scouring this bean field for any sign of blood. And I'm sick to my stomach now just because I thought this deer was dead, and we kicked him up. So we ended up backing out, cleaning up Noah's deer, and going home. And it's one of those things, like, you think you're gonna sleep, but you really don't. And he ends up waking me up, what was it, at 6 o'clock that morning, because he went and grabbed the chip out of the camera and watched the footage back and thought I shot a 170-inch deer. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
So yeah, so one of the obviously the fortunate things is the boys got it on film, and we were able to kind of look at it and say, this deer's dead. It's just a matter of finding it. And one of the things that's kind of funny too is I was actually at a football meeting when these guys were out hunting, And so when they called me, I actually had to leave the meeting because they were screaming so loud on my phone that I couldn't stay in the meeting because the guys were looking at me like, what the heck is going on? And so, you know, hearing these guys and the excitement that they had in their voices saying, hey, we got 2 deer down, you know, was like, hey man, I just got to finish this meeting and then I'll be out to help you. And so getting out there and actually tracking and looking for the blood and stuff like that, you know, we knew that the deer was going to die. We just knew that there was probably a pretty good chance that when they went down to get Noah's deer that they probably kicked this deer up. And like I said, we scoured, like Isaac said, scoured the bean field, and actually we actually did find where it actually got up, went out to the field, and then actually cut back in. And then, you know, the next day, like I said, I got them out at 6 because we do hunt. Our farm is really close to a couple major roads. And so I just said, Isaac, you got to get out there because if this thing died by the creek, it's going to be right by the road. And if somebody sees it, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to take his, you know, cut his horns off. And so him and Noah got up and actually went out. And it's too bad that they didn't put in some of the things in the video about showing how tired they were and just some of the goofy things that they're doing. And hopefully in the future, when those guys are making their videos together, they do leave some of that stuff in there because there was a lot of really funny outtakes because of the fact that they were so tired, they were just trying to keep themselves awake. And so, like I said, unfortunately that stuff got cut out of the film. But then, like I say, they went out, they ended up finding it. You want to talk about the actual find?
So I had my Onyx track on. We ended up walking 2.5 miles that day to find this deer, and it made a big loop around and was actually heading back to where the stand was. Came out and it ended up paralleling right where Noah's deer died, so it actually crossed blood paths with that one, blood trails with it. It ended up coming back up and around, and where we finally found it actually is where he ran that night after we think we bumped him up. So him just making that big circle, and we're thinking also the coyotes were probably chasing him a little bit and ended up actually bringing him down. And as I saw, we lost quite a bit of meat there, but they were kind enough, I guess, to give me a shoulder mount at least. And so I made the pedestal for him just to commemorate that, you know, this is the first deer I've ever shot on camera, my biggest buck. And we can actually show you this right here. So this is his shed from the year before. So just the growth that he made in 1 year is crazy to see. Like, yeah, he got rid of this, or grew this point, but at the same time, just seeing how he made that probably 20-30 inch jump is pretty crazy. So now I think we're on to the more elusive game, I guess, that we chase.
So just a couple of the mounts Isaac wanted to talk about too, that you know, are a little bit different. So this actually is my dad's turkey that he shot out on the farm that we hunt on, and we're, like I say, we're pretty fortunate. We have, you know, 3 family farms that we hunt on mainly, and then we have a 4th family farm that we kind of stay away from just because our cousins hunt there, and because of the fortunate, obviously marrying into a lot of farmland. We, like I say, we try to stay away from the one farm, just because, like I say, that's about the only spot that my cousins can hunt, and so it's just nice giving them the opportunity to hunt deer there. And then, like I say, we typically go out there once a year, just to hang out with everybody and go for one hunt, and then we leave it alone the rest of the year. But this turkey, like I say, my dad went out and he wasn't gonna hunt, and we talked him into going. And he ended up shooting, this is the biggest turkey any of us have shot at all. And so I believe it ended up being close to 27 pounds. It's a huge bird. You know, obviously when you look at it, one of the neighbors actually built the case for it. He needed to do a SCP, kind of like Isaac did this year with his youth hunt. So his SCP was actually enclosing this bird in a case. The sheds that are in there are sheds that I found out on this farm. And so again, kind of a cool mount, and a cool bird. But like I say, my dad didn't want it at his house, but I said, you know what, it's always welcome in my basement. So that's how it kind of ended up here, in here. You want to talk about your coyote?
Yeah, so this was the first coyote I ever took with a gun. So we were doing our annual Thanksgiving deer drive down below our house, and I don't think we saw a deer that day, but my mom shot a buck the night before and hit it in the shoulder, so we gave it some time. And we went in the next day, and the coyotes have been eating its face a little bit. So we always make the joke that this coyote was the coyote that was eating the face, and I had to avenge my mom's deer and ended up shooting it at like 5 yards from me. And so it was just a neat commemoration to that year's hunting, since we didn't have a deer up on the wall that year, so we got a coyote instead.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because this coyote, Isaac wanted to skin it out, so we spent like hours working on this thing and not knowing what we're doing. And then, like I say, Wayne Helming does all of our mounts, and so we took it up to Wayne, and Wayne in about 15 minutes had the whole thing done. And we're like, man, obviously you know what you're doing, and we don't. And so he was able to get it put together for us, and then get it tanned for Isaac, and so yeah, we got a pretty cool, basically mount or rug or whatever you want to call it. It's a little hard to see. I think Isaac's gonna move the camera a little bit closer, but one of the unfortunate things that do happen when living on a farm and living around farmland and stuff like that is that every once in a while, you'll see a fawn, get hit by somebody mowing hay. And this was actually one that didn't get hit by obviously a mower, but got actually ran over by a grain drill. And so one of the things that we had to do was, first of all, I was really nervous about it. I didn't want to touch it, so until we had a DNR call or come out to check it out. And so we called the DNR, and the DNR said, hey, just bag it up, throw it in a freezer, and we'll send somebody out to tag it for you. And so you can tell it's a really tiny mount. It's a tiny deer. And so one of the things that Nate Prairie actually did this mount for me, and he just said it was so tough because the skin was so thin, because it was really obviously a newborn. But he was able to put together a pretty nice mount for me and make a pretty nice pedestal mount. And then over the years, Isaac and I have found a couple really small sheds, so we ended up putting these little dinky sheds in here too, because we had no idea if it was going to be a buck or a doe fawn. But like I said, just for fun, we put those horns in there. And then obviously we have you always have to keep this with it. So this is from the DNR saying that it was legal for us to have this mount. So it always has to be with the fawn. And so, like I said, obviously taking something that was a bad thing and turning it into something that, like I say, we can kind of honor that fawn by having it in our house. And it's just a cute little mount. A couple of final things that we're going to talk about in our basement that we have. This bear, one of the things that we were able to do a couple years ago, it was go on a bear hunt. My buddy Sean Zelmer, just a huge avid bear hunter, called us up and said, hey, I need 2 guys to go on a hunt in Canada. Would you guys be interested? And I'm like, Sean, I got football starting up, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to take off. But talking with Coach Sackett at the time, he was like, absolutely, go ahead. Just get back as soon as you can. So we basically put this hunt together in a couple of weeks. Like I said, we do a lot of things last minute. And so we put this hunt together in a couple of weeks. But fortunately, Sean is just, like I said, he's an avid bear hunter, so he knew exactly what we needed, and he helped us out, got us going. And so we ended up going out to, like I say, going to Canada, getting out there, and one of the guys with us, Chad Hemker, shot a bear right away, and he had like 13 bears come into the bait that he was hunting. And so he's like, you guys need to move. I know you only have a few days to hunt. So my dad and I actually moved stands, went up, we had a double set so we could film. So that's actually one of the things that, it's really exciting watching Isaac do all the filming and Noah do the filming, because this is kind of a dream of mine was to do what they're doing. And so we actually got this guy on film, and we ended up, we had to use tracer strings. The gentleman that we hunted with, the outfit we hunted with, doesn't allow you to hunt without a tracer string, and so you put the tracer string on, you put what's called a prick on you glue on your arrow, and that prick ends up sticking into the animal, and then as your string takes off, it's basically like you're fishing with a bow. And so this bear comes in, it does exactly what the outfitter said. It's going to come in, it's going to take a couple deep breaths, it's going to back out, and it's going to come back in, it's going to feed, and then obviously you have time to take pictures or do whatever you're going to do and then make the shot. And so when it came in, did all those things, I ended up putting a heck of a good shot on it. Thing barreled out. We ended up going back and getting it a few hours later, and it made for a long night because one of the other guys that was with us, Ron, shot one too. So we had two bears down, and it was like 96 degrees out. So we had a lot of cutting up to do. I think we finally finished cutting bear up at like 4 in the morning. And then, but like I say, really kind of a cool mount. Again, Nate did this mount for me, and like I say, obviously made the pedestal for us, and so we've had this in the basement for I don't even know now, almost 15 years.
Yeah, I was only probably 3 or 4 years old when he shot this, but I don't know. Do you want to talk about your outfitter's view on expandables before you shot this?
So yeah, the gentleman that ran the outfit did not like expandables at all. He's adamant that we use fixed blades, and I'm like, well, this is what I got with. And after shooting it, and him seeing basically the hole it put in, he asked me actually if I threw an axe through it, because it was such a big hole. And like I said, I actually had shot a doe the year before, so I knew it was gonna do some damage, and so I wasn't worried about what was gonna happen when I shot the bear. But like I said, it made a believer out of him. He was like, wow, that is unbelievable, the hole that thing put through. But at the time too, the expandables were pretty new when I shot this bear, and so I understood his concern about, are they going to open or aren't they going to open. But like I say, I've been fortunate that since I've been using Raiden broadheads, I haven't had an issue with that. And so like I say, when you put a rage into an animal, it seems to do the trick. And so obviously with this bear, it put a heck of a hole in it, and it didn't go very far. So you can also notice too, if you can see the floor, we're like in danger zones right now, with all the sheds that are on the floor. We have obviously a lot of European mounts. Most of our European mounts are mounts that we found these deer unfortunately dead. It's one of the things too, when you live by two main highways and stuff like that, there's a number of deer that do get hit on the road. We do find some obviously that have got shot by neighbors, that they come over and they die, and we find them in the spring. And so we do take a number of them and turn them into European mounts. But over the years too, ever since Isaac's been able to walk or me to carry him, this is basically everything that we found. And like I say, it's one of our other buddies, Nate Tucker. He really helped me out a lot about how do you find sheds, what do you do when you're looking for them. He put me on to, for the most part, you're looking at bedding grounds, you're looking at where do they eat, food sources. But he said, you're going to find most of your sheds like 60 yards into the woods and then in the fields, and that's actually one of the things that I've started to do. Instead of combing the entire woods, I hit bedding grounds, and I obviously hit the food sources, but I don't a lot of times go too much further than 60 yards into the woods. And like I said, this is the result of it. And so Nate really helped me out. Nate was a guy that I played baseball with, in amateur baseball, and like I say, just an unbelievable hunter, probably one of the most fun guys when it comes to talking to hunting that I've ever met, because he can grab sheds and just put them on his head and it's like perfect. It looks just like a deer. But like I said, his knowledge about hunting is unbelievable. And so like I say, really helped me, helped Isaac out with how we find and look for shed antlers each year.
Alright, so that's going to do it all for this video. Thank you guys for watching. One thing that I'd like to say is we're reaching that 200 subscriber mark, so I go through and I look at my channel analytics each day, and 76 of you guys aren't subscribed, 76% of you that watch our videos. So it takes 4 seconds of your time just to click out of the video and press that subscribe button, make it go from red to gray, and that'd be great. So thank you for watching the episode of Coulee Region Whitetails. We hope to catch you next time.